Check 1, 2. On and live.
Roll.
Very good. Awesome. Hey guys, thanks for hanging out with us again. Silver Bullet Podcast. Welcome back. We are here at Reclaim, kind of getting towards the end of the year where we get very particular about developing systems, making sure everything's kind of in gear, in line for next year to come, all this fun end of the year things. So we've been kind of meticulously working and decided to take a couple weeks to try to get other things in line. So we were coming at you with these episodes every other week, and we might do that here for the foreseeable future, but we've got a lot of things that we're working on our end, but we're still going to keep, bringing you guys some podcasts.
For sure, yeah.
What have you been up to lately?
Getting systems in place, making sure.
There you go. Talk into the mic, big dog.
Boom.
Act like you've done this before.
Making sure that, we're just ready for this whole, whenever it will be post-COVID, entering into new normal, whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
It's just hard as any business owner currently to navigate, what does next week look like? What does next month look like? Because just everything changes on the fly. So
no clue. And the day that we are recording this, guys, is election day. So I hope you guys do your due diligence, your
Go
civic
vote.
duty. Go vote, guys. When you hear this, it's not going to mean much to you, but regardless of outcome of whatever happens. The sun's still going to rise and we have a life to live. And so we're going to do our best on our end to help you guys live a healthy life and give you information to use at your disposal. So with that being said, today we're getting into the topic of blood sugar. Now, I would say that for most, and I don't want to put specific numbers on this, but for most metabolic conditions that we see clinically today with our society, it can stem from having blood sugar issues.
Right.
And I'm no stranger to blood sugar issues. You might hear from people that runs in the family, maybe has a heredity sequence to it. Mm-hmm. And there's some studies that would show that is true.
For sure.
Brandon and I talked last time we were on the podcast about epigenetics and how you can kind of express via your environment and the things you do for your body. That way you're not just essentially living by your DNA genetic code that was given to you at birth. But I think one of the biggest things that we see is that with our cultural understanding of food and activity, we have one of the worst cases of blood sugar issues that correlates to diabetes, obesity, and a lot of other chronic health issues.
Right. Well, we create this problem. I've been guilty of it too. When we lend ourselves to environments and foods that don't always correlate with health, and then unfortunately, the whole metabolic syndrome, blood sugar is just going to be a part of that. So yeah,
for sure. So essentially, for this podcast, who are we talking to? We're not going to sit here and lecture you guys on diabetes. We're not going to lecture you on physiological processes and how your poor decisions led you here or whatnot. No, instead we're probably going to talk to you, the person who has the yearly checkups, where you hear from your physician that says, hey, we need to look at your blood sugar, or maybe you have hypertension that has been developed from having blood sugar elevation issues, or just blood sugar control management is probably the better way to put it. So we're talking to you guys. This makes up a pretty large number of our demographic.
for sure.
Would you agree?
Yeah, and it's hard sometimes to think in this manner. I know that.
Excuse me.
To put ourselves in the shoes of an individual that, let's say, like they probably know they're trending in the wrong way, just with their lifestyle choices.
Right.
Most everyone knows, like, good food from bad food.
Sure.
And if we continuously eat foods that are not healthy for us, they're just like they're waiting. All right, is this going to be the doctor's visit that
I
I'm
get told
something's going on?
Right.
Yeah,
and that's kind of an overhanging thought that you have to worry about. And gosh, we got plenty of things we got to worry about these days. So let's get to some very specific basic facts, okay? One, how does sugar get into your blood? We're always talking about blood sugar. Basic physiological process, basically when you consume food in the form of a carbohydrate, carbohydrates break down into a usable source called glucose, which is the most complete breakdown of a carbohydrate. It's a sugar.
Yeah.
Okay, it is a sugar molecule. And that sugar molecule gets released into the bloodstream based on energy demand. Okay, think about when you are doing a short sprint. Okay, I don't know. Come up with your car is rolling away from you. Like you got to go run after it. Okay.
Kid is running towards the road.
Okay, there you go. Very good. Fight or flight.
Right.
Sequence happens. You need sugar. You need quick acting energy. That's how sugar gets into your bloodstream. Okay. But it's only utilized as an energy source during specific times. Mm-hmm. And just like you mentioned, if a child is running towards a street, you are on full alert. Fight or flight stimulation has kicked in. That's the part of the nervous system you are activating. Blood pressure is high, your focus is there, your need for quick acting reflexes has heightened. That needs quick energy. Comes from sugar. Okay? When you are watching Sunday Night Football, you don't need blood sugar, and your body is not running off of it. It's primarily using fat, and that's because the heart rate is high enough to demand the need for sugar, right?
Right.
Okay.
We're just in, you're just using your essentially almost BMR, like you're at ease.
You are rest and digesting.
Right.
And when you are rest and digesting, you don't use sugar. Your body uses fat. Mm-hmm. Okay. So in a normal functioning body, you consume carbohydrates. The carbohydrates are broken down into sugars, and the sugars are released into the bloodstream when needed. Okay. And when that needed sequence happens, another hormone is released. Once again, this is in a healthy body at the same sequence of blood glucose going into the bloodstream. You also have something called insulin going into the bloodstream, and insulin is secreted by the pancreas, right? And the purpose of insulin is to help, and this I'm using air quotes here because this is a very simplistic way to think about it, is to help, like an old lady across the street, the sugar molecules into the cells of working muscle tissue.
Yeah, it's a transporter.
It's a transporter, okay? It is me seeing you on the other side of the street, a elderly old lady who's walking in the rain. I'm going to come help you cross the street. I am insulin. That's how insulin works, okay? So insulin gets dropped into the bloodstream. It helps the cells helps the sugar into the working cells. We all have good things. That's how it's supposed to be done, okay?
Normal, healthy person.
And this, yes, normal, healthy person. So, most of you have heard of diabetes. It is one of the most prevalent chronic health issues in America right now. And there are two common types. Type 1, okay? Usually, if you are type 1, you are diagnosed very early on in life, usually after a major health episode, whether you are hypoglycemic or hyperglycemic. Mm-hmm. I think, if I'm correct, most of it is hypoglycemic if you have type 1 and that's the major event you have. I could be wrong. But regardless, type 1, your pancreas, you are not producing insulin. Right. So essentially what happens is you have blood sugar you have sugar in the bloodstream and it's just floating around. There is no insulin to help it go where it needs to go. So you essentially just run into, I guess it would be hyperglycemia. Mm-hmm. So you just have a bunch of blood sugar sitting around, which is never a good thing. Okay,
you need more transporters.
Yes, you want it to go somewhere. Usually, somebody with type 1 diabetes has to have some type of insulin injection, right? It has to, or it takes some kind of medication to help with the transportation of the glucose. Right. Type 2 diabetes, this is the more common one that we hear, usually you get diagnosed later in life, right? Unfortunately, due mostly, I'm using air quotes because
he's loving those quotes today.
Keep having a tickle in my throat. I'm using air quotes because there are a lot of different people who have different hurdles that led them to where they are on their diabetic journey, okay? So I don't want to say that every case is the same, because it's absolutely not. But usually you're diagnosed later in life. You go through that pre-diabetic stage, and then you are diagnosed as type 2 diabetic. Mm-hmm. This is insulin resistance, meaning your body might produce insulin, whether it doesn't produce very much, or the insulin that it is producing doesn't work well.
And when
man,
the body,
I apologize.
You're good. When an individual has brought on insulin resistance, or you should kind of have a red flag that there's probably some, obviously metabolic dysfunction going on there. There's a cascade of other health issues, more than likely.
Yeah.
Again, not every single person's going to fall into that, but there are the hope is there are a lot of things that an individual can do. And we'll allude to that. One thing I wanted to mention. I didn't know that there was a difference, type 1, type 2, until probably when I was out of high school.
Right. I didn't either.
And we, so individuals who are type 1 or are type 2, there has to be better education out there, information.
It is interesting because I had a friend in grade school who's type 1 and mm-hmm. didn't know he was type 1 until second grade. He did have a major event that led him in the hospital. He was put on a pump for the rest of his life. But we didn't understand it.
Right.
We as kids, we sure as hell didn't understand it. But even most of the parents, it was just, he's just got to wear this pump, otherwise he's going to pass out. Mm-hmm. Okay, and there really isn't, not that us kids as third and fourth and fifth graders were going to magically have this knowledge that would help him. But everybody, if you ask somebody, you probably know somebody who's type 1, mm-hmm. right? It's a pretty common and prevalent condition, and I would dare say 100% of you listening to this know somebody who's type 2.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting at is, unfortunately, especially in the fitness, not the health, but the fitness ballpark, realm, when we hear diabetes, a lot of individuals immediately gravitate towards, well, what did you do to bring that on?
Right, right. And that's one of those things where I'm using air quotes. I'm just going to guard myself right now because there are a lot of different ways that this manifests, and we have the most common ways. Obviously, we know the faults of our culture right now just from a dietary and sedentary aspect, which all are proven to be one of the things that help this thing manifest itself.
Right.
But air quotes, okay, a lot of different ways to get here.
Sure.
Regardless of how you may or may not have gotten here, we're here. Now we got to talk about what do we do.
Yeah, we just want to help people out.
That's all it is. Okay, so now James and I are endocrinologists. We're not people who really study hormones like insulin to a scientific level where we can talk about all the different theories surrounding type 2 diabetes. But when somebody comes to us and says, hey, I have blood sugar issues, what can I do? This is where we're at.
Yep.
Okay, and this is what we're going to talk about, because I think there are a lot of people who struggle with this, and whether or not they're experiencing health issues with it right now, they know that there's a possibility of them later. And so there's a lot of people who are trying to get out ahead of it. And for most people, let's say, a lot of checkups these days, a lot of checkups are kind of lenient. Like, say you have blood work done and it's clearly not good. It's not healthy, but it's not bad enough to really merit doing all these different things and taking a crazy lifestyle change. But let's say you have a relative, maybe a parent, grandparent, who has the same thing, whether that's high blood pressure, blood sugar issues, whatever. And let's say they have a major event Okay, God forbid they passed away due to a stroke or a myocardial infarction or whatever.
Right.
You now know that there's something in the lineage here that you could suffer from, and now we're trying to get ahead of it. If that's the case, great. Okay, but I would urge all of you that may or may not be dealing with blood sugar issues, heed some of the advice we're going to talk about, because we've seen it work, and we've helped a lot of people. What we do is not special, but it's very consistent.
Yeah, just the prevention aspect of it. It will be many years down the road, but one thing I'm really interested in seeing, 5-10 years from now, I do want to know like the effects of just COVID lockdown measures, and then the potential, like health risks, issues, from that. I'm not saying what was done was wrong, what was done was right, but there are,
we're not gonna know for a while.
Probably will be some telling information as far as what that does for an individual's health.
Oh, 100%. So if we're getting back into the blood sugar aspect of things here, let's talk about things that we know that happen if blood sugar is left unregulated or unmanaged. Obviously, you can have a lot of the hyperglycemia and hypoglycemia. So hyperglycemia would obviously be way too much blood sugar. Can have a lot of health consequences, both kind of instantaneously, but also if left untreated for a while, can have some really detrimental things happen to the body from a whole system standpoint.
Right.
On the opposite side, being hypoglycemic, and we can kind of reference back to, the whole insulin thing. How would you become hypoglycemic if you have blood sugar issues? It's insulin management is what, all this is about. Might not just be blood sugar, but you have to manage insulin as well. If you're somebody who produces insulin, and that insulin's job is to help the blood sugar as a transporter into the cells, think about it. If you have a large amount of blood sugar that gets dumped into the bloodstream really quick, your body can misjudge how much is being dumped and overly stimulate how much insulin goes into the bloodstream. This is something called an insulin rebound effect. Okay, and in a healthy individual, that's what they call it, insulin rebound effect. So like if you drank a Mountain Dew or had all that crazy sugar, in a healthy person, your body would see all that coming in and be like, holy crap, get the insulin out there. I don't know what all this sugar is doing here. And then it sends too much. And then it pulls literally every ounce of blood sugar out, and you just crash.
Right.
Your energy's gone, right? So you have hyperglycemia, you have hypoglycemia, and then for some people who are type 2 diabetic, I'm not 100% sure if this is a possible case for type 1 diabetics, but you can run into diabetic ketoacidosis. So essentially what happens here, the body of somebody who is type 2 diabetic cannot handle blood sugar very well because insulin does not work as well. They have insulin resistance. It's not helping the blood sugar into the working cells. The body can actually start turning catabolic.
Right.
So cortisol, we talk about it all the time. If cortisol gets a little too rampant in somebody who has type 2 diabetes, it will actually start breaking down muscle tissue very quickly.
Yeah, and the body wants to survive.
Right, and it's going to start releasing ketones, which is how we get the ketoacidosis thing.
Yes. It doesn't. Your body just innately, it could care less how you feel. Like if in that situation, or when you're sick, when we feel at our worst, our body is working really, really hard internally to spur us on.
Yeah. The body is smarter than you are.
Right.
And it always will be, which is, it's annoying, but it just shows you how ingenious it is.
Right. So like in that example, lack of medication, or
Sure.
not having access to whatever it is you needed. That's kind of what I was alluding to with the point with COVID. If individuals couldn't acquire specific things, what were some of the potential issues from that?
Which is a 100% unfortunate and
Right.
a costly thing that probably happened to somebody out there. But it's going to be one of those things that we're just not going to know
Right.
until later down the line. But nonetheless, here, those are 3 things that essentially happen if blood sugar can become unmanaged, whether you are, diabetic or not. But most people are often thinking about type 2 diabetes when they think of, diabetes or blood sugar at all. So type 2 diabetes. If you are somebody who is diagnosed with type 2 diabetes and the blood sugar is still something that we can't manage very well, it has been linked to the most common chronic illnesses in the world. Heart attacks, strokes, actually, losing limbs, and what's the word I'm looking for?
I can't read his mind. Sorry,
Fingers,
Laura.
toes. Yeah. And maybe somebody who went through that, but like as diabetics, progress, or I guess symptoms get worse, a lot of the nerve endings and blood flow to the outer extremities of your fingers and toes start to essentially erode away.
Right.
In which case, there are very common that people will actually have fingers and toes or extremities amputated because of that, because of a result of diabetes and blood sugar management issues. So, yeah, it's one of those doom and gloom things, but it's also one of those things that maybe if we had a little more, understanding, a little more encouragement, a little more consistency,
Right.
This is something we can head off, and even possibly we can reverse.
Sure.
A lot of the effects of, not saying that you're going to cure it. I don't think it's the right word to use. I remember 5 or 6 years ago, CrossFit got in trouble for that.
Yeah.
Somebody said something like, we cure type 2 diabetes, and the world had a total fit about it.
Right.
I think you can reverse a lot of symptoms. I don't think cure is the right word to use. Maybe you can completely rid a lot of these things with some person, but to say that we, overall, with what we do in exercise, cures type 2 diabetes, I don't know if that's accurate to say because of something we're going to bring up here in a minute.
Yeah, there's so much going on. One of the things, like when I work with an individual hormone coaching, you alluded to this a little bit ago. Someone can have blood sugar issues, and again, this isn't the majority. We're just loosely using the quotations, but you are not overweight, and that doesn't always equate to type 2 diabetes, or type 2 diabetes doesn't always mean you are overweight.
Dude, I know some very, think of the best way to word this. I know some very robust individuals who, at a glance, you would think probably live an unhealthy life, who put 300 and 400 pounds over their head and on their back,
Right.
and do some incredibly athletic things for them, and their blood panel is spot on.
Yeah, we're conditioned to kind of have these these things that we associate, and there's no accuracy with that.
No.
That's part of what I'm getting at. And the other thing is, if you have a lot of stress in your life and you start to decay, you're catabolic at a hormonal level, or even like your organs just don't function correctly,
Right.
that again can lead to the insulin issues.
And we're going to talk about that here right now when we're talking about intensity and how that matters when you're talking about how to incorporate exercise in with managing your blood glucose. So when we're talking about exercise intensity, let's back up a little bit. Okay, you're at the front desk. You handle a lot of the people that come into our facility, want to know what we're about, what we do. Someone says, hey, I have high blood sugar issues. I have blood sugar management issues. How do you have a conversation with them and say, hey, yeah, we can help? What's like one of the first things you talk about?
Well, the very first thing I'm going to talk about, they already know that exercise is going to help them out. Simply that we can build more muscle in time. We can increase the body's metabolic response, the amount of calories that you're going to burn in a given day, and therefore we will become more insulin sensitive. But the very first thing I'm going to ask is, how much sleep do you get at
Ooh,
night?
good ones. Yeah, so there's a couple things that actually promote the resistance of insulin itself. So keep in mind, type 2 diabetic, insulin resistant issues, the insulin itself just doesn't work, doesn't bind well to glucose to help it into cells. One of those things is having excess body fat, right? So having excess body fat around has been shown to be one of the major causes of insulin resistance. Right. But like you just alluded to, sleep. Why sleep?
Well, if we can't heal the body, if we can't recover, we're doing no benefit. Like, rest is when the body resets.
Yeah.
Rest is when we build back up. Rest is when everything can kind of like start fresh and function at an optimal level the next day. If we never give the body the opportunity to do that, I'm just trying to make this in the most basic sense as possible.
Kiss, baby.
You can come in and you can train as hard as you want, and you can use up as much glucose, blood sugar in that strength training session as possible. But if we're not recovering, eventually you're beating a dead horse.
It's crazy because like every conversation we have, every topic we have is always about recovery. If you can't recover, it doesn't matter.
The person who recovers the best gets the furthest.
Ooh, there's something. That's a good little quote. So yeah, you're talking about two things. Obviously, we can grow muscle tissue. When we grow muscle tissue, it helps promote the loss of body fat itself. When you get sleep, that also helps with your body being able to heal and utilize free fatty acids for fuel. Maybe later while you're actually in that rest and digest area. If I'm having that conversation, I'm talking about getting somebody out of stressful situations.
Yeah.
If I'm having that conversation, the first thing I want to do is ask them how their work life is, because for most of us, that's where a lot of our stress is developed. Some people it might be at home, some people it might be relationships elsewhere, but stress is stress, and you got to be able to manage that, because here's what happens, and here's why it can be a hard thing to manage with type 2 diabetics. Okay, and this is one of the things with 3 of the people that I've been working with as of recently, was one of the biggest factors. When you are stressed, you are not in your rest and digest nervous system.
Yep.
When you are stressed, when you have you're over anxious, have some anxiety issues, or I don't know, my mind is having a brain fart, but you know what I'm talking about. Somebody who's overly stressed, your body, and I have a tickle in my throat that is driving me absolutely nuts right now. Your body senses that, puts you into your fight or flight mode, and the cool part about your body, let's say that you need to get into fight or flight mode, but you don't have any food to consume and break down and turn into sugar. Guess what? Your body stores its own sugar in the form of something called glycogen, and it is stored in your liver and kidneys. Mm-hmm. So when you get into your fight or flight mode, your body dumps blood sugar out and says, here you go. Let's deal with this stress. We're in the fight or flight. Obviously, we got something going on. Let's deal with it. This is how people have elevated blood sugar issues during high intensity workouts. So,
right,
when that person walks in and we talk about blood sugar management, first thing I'm going to do is like, hey, do you work out? If you don't, what are you wanting to do? Because if you're wanting to do some high intensity interval training, I'm going to tell you right now it's probably the wrong thing to do.
For sure. Yeah. I had. I'm not going to mention the lady's name, but you brought up a really, really good point. And individuals need to hear this. She came in and she was talking to me about her work, environment and lifestyle and everything, and what the stress of her career brought on. And I said, look, when you sign up, she did sign up.
Yeah.
It's like when you come in here, I literally want you just to come in here and have fun. That's all I want you to do right now. Just come in and enjoy yourself. Because if coming in here causes additional stressors, and then the workout itself is also an additional stressor, we are doing you no benefit good. Whatsoever.
No good at all.
So we've learned a lot from our mistakes, and we offer up, I would say, better introduction advice.
The person that I have helped the most with blood sugar management issues, worked out 3 times a day. Hold on.
She's
back up. He worked out 3 times a week, he only did strength training, and oftentimes, based on his stress levels, he stretched, and that was it. Both his blood sugar came down to double digits for the first time in years, and his blood profile showed that his A1Cs came down by half. Like, there's a lot of great blood profile information that we got with his last test, and the exercise had little to do with it.
Right.
It really did. It's not to say that exercise can be beneficial for people. It really can, especially if you're promoting structure. Like, I made a Facebook post the other day on our page, like, exercise promotes change, and change that is positive can carry over to any aspect of your life.
Right.
And that could be just lifestyle, it could be nutritional, could be recovery, whatever.
Yeah.
You need all those positive things working in your favor, right? So exercise can totally help, but I think the more beneficial piece of information is that when you find out that, hey, maybe you're pre-diabetic or you're type 2 diabetic, starting an exercise routine and going, forgive my words, balls to the wall is probably the wrong thing to do.
Yeah. It's you talked about the what's going to happen with the body and the dumping of glucose and just how that's going to continue to cause a this
catabolic
right.
effect.
It's just going to lend itself into the same thing over and over and over again. So what do we do about it? We have to address the most basic things first and foremost. Like, again, let's focus on getting adequate rest at night, and then not completely changing all of your food in 3 days. We're doing this crazy, do this no carb diet
Detox right now.
Yeah, I mean, we have to just subtly implement things and create sustainable habit change over the
consistency. Mild intensity, shorter duration workouts, consistently. Figuring out what foods are responsible for spiking your blood sugar consistently. Eliminating alcohol, probably one of the worst things that anybody will ever have to be told for around these times. But if you have blood sugar issues, it's a huge factor. Stress matters. Sleep and activity lifestyle matters. All these different things can affect your blood sugar. But, these are conversations that we're having, at later times with people when they come to us and say, hey, I have blood sugar management issues. What can I do? The first thing we're going to tell them to do is that we have to be able to get sleep, and we have to be able to consistently manage stress.
Right.
And it sounds like the two things that you'd probably never be told by a physician. And I, air quotes, could be wrong, and I hope that these things are being talked about to the masses. But from what I hear, a lot of it is, we'll put you on insulin and we'll monitor it and we'll see what it does. But for the bulk majority of the people that we talk to, they want a preventative measure. You know what I mean? And that's where a lot of our stuff comes in. Exercise, mild to low intensity, honestly, to keep the body out of a very stressful situation. A lot of focus on recovery practices, and then, I think the biggest point that you brought up was sleep. I mean, a lot of this is like, it's just, I don't know. It seems like the most foundational things that we are to do as human beings that we don't do lead us to this.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I was very guilty of this as well. We're kind of programmed to just continue to just go and go and go and go. And when I even had my own, hormonal issues that I had to work through with the coach, and that led me to want to start, researching and studying that a lot more. We all have to learn how to literally just deal with life, at a very, very basic level. And one of the things we really work on with our clients now, when they first start out here, is you have to learn how to remove yourself from situations and not make an emotional decision all the time, know. And that in itself, once you can learn that key concept, a lot of this stuff will eventually start to take care of itself.
It does, and that's kind of a bold prediction, and it's not something you can use in a clinical practice. Right. This needs to be an individual conversation with somebody.
Sure.
But these are conversations that we have, and they are proven to at least show some impact. I'm not going to say they're proven to work for everybody in every situation. That's our job to dive in and really figure out why or why not, I guess. But for a lot of us, we, this is one of the most common health issues in America right now, blood sugar. So how do we really go about changing the culture to put us in a better position not have to deal with this? Where do we go from there? Like that is one of the biggest portions of the iceberg, really. We talk individually with people, it's a lot easier, but how do you really get in a preventative state culturally?
This is a crazy statement. We could probably do an entire podcast on this. I fully believe that if an individual took their cell phone, and got rid of it for a week, I guarantee it, almost most all health measures would trend in a positive direction.
You know what? I especially now, I think you're right. And you know what? I think that is something that we will save for part 2 of this, because we are going to go ahead and break this thing down into 2 separate things. Obviously, today we wanted to talk a little bit about, when you're told, hey, you have or on the verge of having high blood sugar or blood sugar management issues. Here is what they're talking about, okay? We will get a little bit more specific. How do we go about training people, or how do we go about working individuals with high blood pressure, or high blood sugar?
Right.
Next episode. And the purpose is we want to bring some real life experience. Not with us, but the clients that we have worked with that have okayed us to kind of talk about their situation.
We have several, I think, as long as they're okay with us potentially sharing the information. We won't bring up any names, but we can at least look at their stuff and say, this is what's happened in this period of time.
Yeah. And you all can draw your own conclusions, but this is how you learn through case studies that aren't actually quote unquote case studies, using a lot of air quotes in this episode, and that's fine. But personal experience or having relatable situations is something that can help you guys learn a little bit better. So in the next episode, that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about a couple cases where we took some unique approaches to managing blood sugar, and we'll talk about the food aspects and where we led them, and why we did this versus why we did this. But then from there, essentially it becomes an individual breakdown of what was truly needed from both a lifestyle aspect and then from a environmental aspect. And I'll kind of explain what that means next podcast. But for a lot of what we're going to talk about next week, it's going to be a lot of perfect world situations. What we think, you could do to get out in front of that cultural paradigm shift. You know what I mean? So we might have some hypotheticals next week, but it'll be a pretty good episode.
Well, and there's a space for this now. Individuals, we're going to cater to the person who believes in the information we're sharing, and that's what they're looking for.
Right.
We're not always going to be able to get on here and say, hey, statistically with this person and this person and this person, this was the outcome. Because look, I'll say it. If you haven't figured it out by now or learned by now, you can make all of those numbers show exactly what you want them to. And the last time I checked, the health of the United States is not going in the right direction.
Correct. Yeah. And 66% of all statistics are made up. So, you know what? We can throw statistics at you.
That was made up.
Exactly. My point exactly. So, guys, we will bring you the part 2 episode to this. And whether or not you're somebody who actually has been diagnosed with high blood sugar, this is something that could be beneficial information for you, because there's a great chance that you know somebody who is. So stick around. Part 2 will come next episode. You got anything you want to add onto this one right here?
with all of this whole topic, we want to be mindful of the individuals who do have blood sugar issues, type 1, type 2, whatever, and again, not just like put people in a box, because there's opportunity for you. Everyone can take a better approach to their health.
Yeah, everybody's situation is different.
Right.
Nobody's is the same. You can't put everybody in the same box that is quote unquote either type 1, type 2, or maybe they don't even know. It's just, you can't lump everybody into one category, and we won't. But nonetheless, this is something that is taking over the world. I'm not going to use the epidemic word. I think people are getting really tired of hearing words that are related to that.
Yeah.
But if you really look at it, and this is not a statistical error, this is true, 2/3 of the population is obese.
Yeah.
And when you talk about obesity, type 2 diabetes is right there. Okay, so this is something that can be very beneficial to people.
Sure.
And this is very basic information. We're not getting super detailed. We're not trying to go over anybody's head physiologically, but stuff that can be beneficial to you, maybe your neighbor, maybe your relative, whatever the case may be. But we'll get into some more specific examples, how we work with people with blood sugar issues to help better manage and essentially get them feeling better.
Yeah.
Which is one of the best compliments in the world.
Confidence, baby.
Oh my God. It's like I feel better than I have in the last 15 years.
Yeah.
Like, yes.
Yeah, that's a big thing we'll touch on. We got to end this at some point. But just gaining confidence from the most simplistic thing, and then that just creates the desire to want to do the next thing and the next thing. And again, that's why we don't start off individuals with high intensity training.
Snowball effect.
Because they wake up the next day and they're like, oh, I'm super sore, I'm tired, I don't want to go do it. And then they don't.
All right, guys. All right, I am Colton Zeg, James Ogle sitting next to me. We're talking about blood sugar. Next week, we'll talk about more specific examples with people that we've worked with. Hope you guys have enjoyed. This is the Silver Bullet Podcast.
Boom.